backlog and the wait times it takes, especially for, you know, people from India or China or Mexico. The other alternative that we're seeing a lot of these beneficiaries explore is the EB-5, especially because clearly the the green card is, instead of a 25-30 year wait time, you're getting it probably in like 2 to 3 years.
It's a really good point. The connection between the Indian H-1B holder and the EB-5, because the uh, Indians only have one employment-based green card that's current, meaning that file their adjustment of status at the same time as the initiating document. Why I call it initiating document is it has a couple of different names. For employment-based, it's an I-140. For family-based, it's an I-130, except for the EB-5, it's an I-526. So you can file your I-526 at the same time as your adjustment of status in only one category if you're a national of India or born in India, and that's the EB-5 green card in the TEA zones for rural and high unemployment. And in particular, the rural are going, it seems, about twice as fast as the high unemployment ones right now. So for Yesh's clients, corporate clients, or the beneficiaries of these corporate clients, and for her friends, this might be the only path to getting a green card in any current time. And we're seeing some of the fastest turnaround times for I-526s. One of the projects we put one of our clients in recently returned the 526 in 12 months. And with the adjustment of status, 17 months. So less than a year and a half, had the green card in hand. So that is really super fast. And again, about twice as fast as you're seeing the high employment regional centers. And to put it in perspective, there's a way to get immigration to speed up if they're too slow. That's called filing a writ of mandamus. That's a lawsuit mandating them to act. The U.S. will vigorously fight a writ of mandamus on an EB-5 if it's 4 years or younger. So they don't think it's slow if it's 4 years. So one getting approved in 1 year, super fast, and really good news for Indians who are so backlogged on EB-2s and EB-3s of 12 to 15 years respectively, if not longer. And on EB-1s, about 4 years, right? And on standalone EB-5s. So if you're doing your own project or you're doing a project outside the $800,000 minimum amount at the $1,500,000, then those are about 4 years wait. So I'm glad you piped in, Yash, on you're connecting to H-1Bs, because it's really your client base that, could you really use this this visa to help them get to permanent residency just a lot faster.
We have sorry to interrupt. We have a random comment that is not about EB-5s. I think it's a question. Someone is saying EB-3 processes are really complex these days. Is that true, or is it that they just don't have an attorney?
I don't know that they're any more complex these days than others. The EB-3 process is a labor certification process. Ashley does a ton of this. Ashley, it's no more complicated today than usual, but it's a complicated process, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always been a complicated process, and I think it's still as complicated as it was. They might be referring to the time frames. I know the DOL is taking a bit longer than what we're used to, so that's a recent change. But the complicated nature has always been.
So prevailing wages are taking longer. Cert applications.
The perms, yeah, the 989s are taking longer.
Right, and then the backlogs for different countries are different, right? So the backlog for India is probably 15 plus years. Same for China. They're long, Philippines, right? So some of the countries are current, but the more populated ones aren't. Let's go back to the EB-5 though, Pierre.
Yes, absolutely. Why don't we go ahead and start answering the question of who's eligible and who this journey process is for?
Okay, so let me just go to the background. What's an EB-5? So an EB-5's nickname or title is the investor visa, right? So if you invest in what's called a new commercial enterprise, or NCE, that's a new company, and that means a company, it's really not all that new, honestly, since the 1990s, but it's a lot easier to do a new one than a current one that has employees and stuff like that. Those require those companies to be failing, meaning 2 years or 24 straight months of not being profitable and stuff like that. So it's really dangerous to go into that. It's really going to slow things down. So it's better to stay in the new ones. So going into a new commercial enterprise, the amount of the investment for the typical one is $1,050,000. Okay, that means anywhere in the country you can do that. There is a thing called a target employment area, TEA, that says the investment only has to be $800,000. Now that was raised from $500,000 in 2020 to $800,000 today. There's a whole reason for that, and politically charged on trying to do that. I don't think any of the investors really wanted it to raise, and obviously none of the companies needed it to raise, and none of the investors wanted it to raise, but they did. It pulled some people out of the ability to do it. But basically it's 800,000 for the target employment areas. Now, if you want to pool investments, meaning having more than one investor, it has to be in what is called a regional center. Regional center are designated areas by USCIS. That's where the project will either apply to have a regional center or be placed in an existing regional center by filing a form with USCIS describing that project with specificity. And they have to do what's called an exemplar. And that's where they say, here's our business plan that it complies with the matter of Ho. And in that, it's going to describe how they're going to create at least 10 jobs for Americans or green card holders for each immigrant investor in each of these $800,000 chunks, or I guess they can be $1,050,000. Regional centers don't have to be TEAs, but most of them are, and that's why they do that. So if you're pooling more than one person, it has to be in a regional center, and that even means if they're related. So you've got 50-50 owners, you still have to do a regional center, which will really increase the complexity, time, and things like that to have it designated as such. If you're doing one investor, you can do a standalone, but standalones take a long time to get approved because immigration really goes over it with a fine-tooth comb, whereas a regional center project is going to have the same project details case after case after case, and some of them will have hundreds of different clients, right? Hundreds of different investors, so they've seen it. So that's why the bigger regional centers with hundreds of clients are usually faster, because USCIS has seen the project so many times, they're only going to focus on the beneficiary. So once you have a regional center project in this designated area, and if you want to have one, we can do strategy sessions on how to do that. Or if you want to invest in one, we're an affiliation with or a referral source with a broker dealer. Broker dealers are like stockbrokers. They can actually tell you what's a good regional center and what's not a good regional center. Lawyers can't do that unless they're already licensed under FINRA and the SEC to do that. So make sure that you're not taking advice from somebody that's not FINRA certified. That'll be like Series 7, Series 6, Series 83, I think. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but these are people that can actually do the due diligence on these projects and tell you which ones are good. So, if you want to know about a project, we can refer you to somebody to take a look at these different projects. Never let somebody tell you about a project indirectly. It's like going to a doctor or going to a lawyer. You want to make sure that you understand and that they understand what your risk threshold is, that you're hearing directly from somebody's licensed to do the due diligence, what the due diligence is. Is it a good project for all the reasons, right? I mean, has anybody been convicted of fraud that's affiliated with it? Who's building it? How many other people have been in it? Have there been approvals of the 526, the removal of conditions called the 829, and repayment of the investment or loan? All those things are due diligence pieces that a broker dealer could tell you about. And we could tell you how to ask a broker dealer those sorts of questions if you need that, but we can't make those suggestions. So once you select what you want your project to be, then the issue goes to the beneficiary on two fronts. So a regional center project, you must be an accredited investor. That's not an immigration regulation. That is a securities or SEC regulation. Accredited investors are investors that have either a salary of $200,000 a year, a combined salary with their spouse of $300,000 a year, or $1 million in assets, not including their residential property. So if you're not an accredited investor, that requires the investment to have many more security documents. So most of them won't take non-accredited or unaccredited investors. Once you are going to invest, you have to invest $800,000. So you can either write a check for $800,000, but many people don't have that in their checking account or their savings account or whatever. So if you don't have all of that money, there's two ways to get that money. One is through a gift. A gift has to be from an immediate family member. Immediate family member means mother, father, brother, sister, grandparent, on either grandparent, or children, right? So those are the people that can give you the 800,000. Nobody else can give it to you, but you can borrow the money. If you borrow the money, it has to be a secured loan. What I mean by a secured loan is you have to have assets that are equal to the amount of money you borrow. So if you borrow all of it, that means you have to have assets in $800,000, right? If you have $200,000 and you want to borrow the remaining 600, you have to have $600,000 that of assets that would secure that loan. Now, a couple things about that are really important. A lot of Yesh's clients have this. This property can be outside the United States if you want to secure it with that. If somebody will loan you the money against property you own in India or China or Great Britain, it doesn't matter. They can do that. That is their risk tolerance, and they can do it. It can be a bank, but it can also be an individual. If it's not a bank, meaning it's an individual, even if they're related to you, like Uncle Joe or the guy that calls himself Uncle Joe and he's not really your uncle, they have to do the source of funds. They're both you and the person that loans you that money. If it's a person, not a bank institution, they would have to prove where they got the money from, right? What does that mean? It means that you can only get it from a lawful source. When they started this, they didn't want drug dealers' money. I don't think there's many drug dealers involved in this, but it's hard sometimes to prove where money came from. That's what you'd have to do. Now, what we do as attorneys is we fill out source of funds documents. If it all came from your checking account and you were paid money because you just sold your business for $1 million, and we could show that transaction and the checking account and the money leaving the checking account and going into the investment for the EB-5, that would be enough. But sometimes we got to show it's related to this and it's related to that. Sometimes this thing could be 1,000 pages long. I've never done one 1,000 pages long, but it could be. In any case, it's tracing every penny, where it came from, who got it, how they got it, that sort of thing. That's a very, very important piece of the EB-5 for the beneficiary. Where did they get the money to invest? And so there's some concepts on that. Pierre, I think it's a good time to stop now and maybe either have some correspondence with Ashley or Yesh or questions or you.
I think it's great, John. So I do want to ask you a side question though. Is this to a lot of viewers, it sounds like, this could be a once in a blue moon thing. Does your firm do a lot of these? Is this popular, or is it like, again, for a celebrity?
Oh, it's not for celebrities. It's for regular people. I mean, that's why, look, when it went from 500 to 800, it cut out some regular people. But honestly, it's a great visa. I mean, what it's all about is if you invest in an American company and create 10 jobs for Americans, you get permanent residence in our country. Other countries call it a golden visa. Many of them, it's a straight citizenship. Many of them, it might be less money, like $250,000. But this is America. And so it's going to be a higher barrier of entry to get an immigration benefit by investment. So it's a fantastic visa. In my opinion, it's a little too complicated and it takes too long. It should be easier.
How long are we talking, John, in on average? Or why don't we ask Yesh that? Yesh, how long does this process usually take, in your opinion?
I think right now we're seeing EAD cards probably come in within the 6 months.
So talk about what an EAD card is, because that's going to blow people away. So an EAD card is what?
Like an employment authorization. And so
what that means is if you file an adjustment of status, right, along with the underlying investment visa, you're going to get a card that allows you to work anywhere. So it's kind of like a de facto green card. And it is, unless the green card gets denied. So actually, there's an update on that. 6 months. 6 months was pretty common for a while, but we've started seeing them come back in as little as 60 days for recent ones, which is really super great for the H-1B clients like you have, Yash, because they can become entrepreneurs, right? So if you have an EAD card, that means you can work a job in addition to the visa you have. So if you're on an H-1B, you can work another type of visa, another type of job, including your own company, right? So this is
I
what
was gonna
people that
ask a question.
yeah.
So for an EB-5, they don't have to work at the business they're investing in. They can work.
Very, very seldomly do. They're most typical to be limited partnerships with very, very limited involvement, meaning none, practically none. And that's by design, and that's what most of them are. They're not job creators for the immigrant. They're job creators for Americans, which is different than other types of visas, aren't they? Right? Like an E2,
Right.
You're the owner of the company. You can do your own standalone EB-5, but you know that those take longer, and because immigration isn't cranking them out, and I say cranking them out, they're still taking a long time, Pierre. So like I said, the fastest one we've seen recently on a rural regional center EB-5 was 12 months for the initial part done, with an extra 5 months to get to the labor cert. I'm sorry, the adjustment of status. Those are the timeframes we're seeing. But what I was telling you earlier is that immigration thinks 4 years is not too long to adjudicate one of these.
A whole presidential term.
The whole presidential term. And that's super fast for certain countries.
I mean, but
Right.
it also makes sense because I was thinking about it the other day, and it's a green card, right? It's a forever thing.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a good attorney and they can make sure that your application is correct, I think the wait is worth it if you have an EAD. The misconception, John and Ashley and Yash, is that an EAD is like a transition time, but truthfully, there's a lot of folks in the U.S. living a full-time life on an EAD waiting for a
EADs are
status.
great. EAD is so much better than an underlying like H-1B. The H-1B, you're shackled to your company. That's what you have to do. The EAD card allows you to be employable as an American is while you're waiting on the green card. But I want to bring this up. So a lot of the regional centers have been around for a long time. The ones that the broker dealers would suggest to our clients, a lot of them have 100% approval and have had 100% approval for decades. And they just know how to design these things. Many of them are very big projects with hundreds of investors, and then they'll do another one and another one, and they've just got it into a machine. And the money comes in and the money goes out. Sometimes it's a loan, sometimes it's equity, but in the loans, you got a loan amount, right? It doesn't usually pay a lot, but it's just mezzanine financing that's coming through, and they just go through and they get approved every time. And you can do, and that's what the due diligence is going to be, right? It's like, how many 526s have they done? How many been approved? How many 829s have they done to remove the conditions? And how many have been paid back? And that's the due diligence a broker dealer can be. We're seeing overall a 50% denial or approval of EB-5s. And the reason is that people think they can just do any project and it's going to work. And immigration is really, really meticulous, and they'll turn it down. Where most of these fail is somebody has a business model and they try to design it with exactly the right number of visas or jobs to visas. Oh, I'm going to bring in 3 investors. I'm going to create 30 jobs. That means you have to do 30 jobs, 30 full-time jobs throughout the entire period. And if you fall below it, one of your investors or maybe more isn't going to get it. I've seen horrible business models thrown into this equation. We represent a lot of Indians and staffing companies. Somebody actually tried to make an Indian staffing company for an EB-5. Here's the problem. They had it in a rural state, and the concept is to hire American workers, and basically their entire business model for the business was bringing in Indian techies because there's a lot of Indian techies available to bring in and not enough American techies. So to have to get American techies and put them in a rural state, it just isn't going to work, right? And then the problem after that on top of it was that if you could get them to go there, you're going to have to pay them higher amounts of money, not lower amounts of money. And for the EB-5 to work, you're looking at taking an $800,000 investment and making it work to cover your payroll. Well, at 100,000, that's 8 workers, right? You're already losing money at 10 workers. And then if you got to pay them more, then it didn't cover it. It didn't go very far, right? You're losing money on it. So really got to think through what your project is, and it has to work. Another thing that we see in Nightmare is, even though they're approved, we're seeing some people put together projects and somebody has a small equity amount in a building, and then there's no exit strategy. So at the end of the day, they get their green card, but they paid their 800,000 and they've got a 0.25 percentage in a building, right? Can't sell it, and that's it. So really, the project is important, right? On it's a good enough project, the exit strategy for it, all those sort of things are important. And then structuring it. If you've got a project and you want to make it in an EB5, you really got to know what you're doing, or you're gonna lose people's money, and a lot of times you're not just losing their money. You're losing their family's money. They've had these properties and interest for a long time. They put them up to loan you the money to do it, and you crashed it because you didn't know what you're doing on your EB5. And then that destroys communities and relationships and family relationships on all sides on that. So we're seeing way too many denials for people that just don't know what they're doing on the structure of these things. And that's sad and really irresponsible, honestly. So there's ways to do this. There's easier ways to do it, and you really got to know what you're talking about, or it's going to blow up. And honestly, you don't want to get in a fight with somebody you lost $1 million almost with. You're probably going to be sued pretty bad on that, and then what are you going to do about that? So anyway, just some things that have come up recently. In these
Wonderful. Ashley, do you have any questions for John or Yesh? I know it's not your cup of tea, but it's interesting to hear an attorney ask another attorney questions.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. What would you say is the most common problem that comes up with these?
Jobs. They don't understand that they need to create jobs enough, and that they don't get created. When we were doing our standalone hotels, we almost always said, let's get a couple of hotels, right? So if the model of your hotel is, I'm going to get a small hotel and I'm going to work in it and my family's going to work in it, you're not going to create 10 jobs for an American, right? So those were always the struggles there. So we always had to make sure, was there a restaurant? Restaurants are really good because restaurants are low paying salaries, and you got a lot of people that work in them, right? And so it's funny, the guy that invented the EB5 for immigration, when he stepped out of it, opened a chain of Der Wiener Schnitzel, which is a hot dog fast food restaurant chain in California, and just started dropping people up in it. Great one, right? I mean, restaurants are good. But right now, yeah, that's the problem. It's the jobs, and
For how long do you have to maintain these 10 American jobs? If it drops down to 9, are you?
Yeah. So there's an initial approval of the I-526, then a year and a half, and it's a conditional green card. A year and a half later, you have to show that the $1 million, or I'm sorry, the amount of money was invested, and the 10 jobs were created and sustained. Now they can go down a little bit, but you're gonna have to show that it's going to maintain over it. So where these things could fail is somebody hired 10 people 2 years ago and then fired them and never hired them again, and it doesn't look like it would sustain them now, right? So that's where it falls down. Another way they fail is called substantial change. So you get a business and they go, here's what we're going to do. And then they're like, well, this doesn't work. So I was called, hey, can I stop my rural tech company and do a sports bar in another state? Like, no, on 2 reasons. Number one, the jobs are supposed to be in that one state and county, and that's the biggest tie to it. And secondly, that's a totally different business, right? Sports bar and a tech company aren't the same thing. So that would be deemed a substantial change and would result in a denial. So another reason that the standalone, or let's make this model fit, doesn't always work is because companies need to evolve sometimes, right? They're like, hey, we're doing this today and we're going to do this tomorrow because the opportunity is great. And they're not going to care over your investment if they got to stay alive and do those things. And then it is what it is. So that's another reason.
Spot on. All right. Very well. Let's do our closing remarks. And then I do want to ask you, John and Ashley and Yesh, how people can reach you and book a session with you. So why don't we start our closing remarks with Yesh,
Okay.
and then we'll
Okay.
do Ashley and then John.
Okay. Always a pleasure attending these. EB5s are something that most of my clients wish they had more access to. I do have a question though, and I didn't get a chance to ask. But seeing that 800,000 or $1 million is a pretty significant amount, and people just don't have that laying around um, in their checking accounts. Is profile building something that you can help with?
Yeah, it's a really good
Yeah.
idea, actually. Yeah, we're glad to have those conversations to tell them how to get there. And that takes a while. And
Yeah.
we found that the EB5 client, doesn't usually sign overnight. So you got to have a lot of conversations before you get there, or you got to talk to a lot of people before you find those that do it. And I'm finding that a lot in the Indian market, more than the Chinese and Vietnamese market. They, for whatever reason, it's just more mature on the EB5. They just know, they like it, they do it. A lot of tire kicking on the Indian marketplace right now, it seems. But some of it's because they're not there yet, and some of it's they don't quite understand how to secure or convey or to do this so they can get the money if they don't have it readily available. And that's a real deal. So yeah, we're glad to have those conversations to help them understand how to do that.
Very well. Thank you, Yesh. Ashley, anything to add to that?
No, this was I was more here to observe and ask questions. So this was great. It sounds like there's a lot of different interesting companies that you get to work with through this, which I was a little bit surprised about. I figured it would be mostly in the tech sector. So hearing
No,
about hotels and restaurants is pretty
yeah,
cool.
a lot of it's development. Honestly, a lot of building of mixed use commercial properties, or just residential sometimes. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
neat. It's been used a lot of times to rebuild downtowns. You can see a lot of the sports facilities and other amenities in big cities are sometimes funded with that. A lot of major hotels have been.
Yeah, I wonder what'll happen now with after Hurricane Helene, if
Yeah,
people will be moving in to put up new stuff. We'll see.
yeah, not a bad way to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always talk about strategy sessions, but I don't think I've ever thought a strategy session with an attorney is needed more than for the EB5. I mean,
Oh
they're
yeah.
needed for all, but this is definitely one where you'd want to be in conversation with an experienced attorney who's done an EB5. I wouldn't want to be an attorney's first EB5 per se, so it's really good, John, to for anyone watching us that's remotely interested in the EB5 program to go ahead and reach your team
Yeah,
and
I
schedule a
can't stress
session.
that enough. You know, the ones I like my clients to be in are the ones that have, a sustained 100% approval rating for years. And with a 50% denial rate, it's showing you how many bad projects are out there. And the projects are bad, right? It's not the investors aren't doing their thing. Now, the source of funds is important. You got to know how to do it, understanding how to secure interests in foreign countries and how to move money and all those sort of things are important too. So this visa has so many complex things. And again, attorneys can't suggest you to be in a regional center. So without a securities broker. And so that's why we have a securities broker that we refer to. So what we often do is have the strategy session to tell them about how it works, ascertain whether or not they have the revenues or or have the funds or can get the funds, or where they get the funds and what those people need to do. And then we many times will suggest that they go talk to our broker that we know, and then they look and get introduced to a number of projects, find the one that they like, and really understand that project and understand that there's hopefully little to no risk. Even though it has to have risk, that risk can be mitigated, and you'll see the really good ones know how to do it, and they know how to return the money. Or I really love the of taking a project and helping someone become a regional center, or to put it in a regional center. We can do that too, and that way, if they do take money, they can do it. And there's other ways to do this. If you're competing against the old regional centers, what else are you going to show? How is this going to work? What I like to say is make sure that the deal works before you think about immigration. Right? Immigration should be the kicker. not the reason to do it. So if the immigration is the only reason you want to do it, probably not a good deal. If it's a good deal, and you get a green card out of it, great, do it for that. But understand that, the deal needs to stand on its own. Or what's your return on investment? When are you going to get it? How is it structured? What's your risk? Have you done due diligence? All these sort of things are important. So a lot of things about these visas that make them complex.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time, John, Yesh, and Ashley. On the screen, you'll see two emails: information at vlilaw.com. And then earlier we showed hello at onlinevisas.com, and then the website onlinevisas.com. Reach out, don't be shy, to John and his team. And with that being said, thank you so much. We'll see you at the next webinar.